The rain had been falling for hours that night, soaking the crowded streets of Karachi. People rushed past one another with umbrellas and hurried feet, but one girl walked slowly through the storm, her thin shawl clinging to her trembling shoulders. Her name was Millionaire, 23 years old, small-town born, carrying dreams bigger than the world would allow. Her shoes were torn, her clothes worn thin, but her eyes still held something rare: hope. She had come to the city not for comfort, but for survival. The world had taken almost everything from her, yet somehow her heart refused to break completely. If you believe in kindness, in love that crosses barriers, and in second chances, please take a moment to like, comment, share, and subscribe. Your small act of support helps us keep telling stories that remind the world goodness still exists. Elena worked in a small roadside cafe, not as a waitress, but as a cleaner. Every morning, she arrived before sunrise, sweeping the floor, washing dishes, wiping tables, and smiling through exhaustion. Her boss barely noticed her. To him, she was just another face in the background, another pair of hands doing cheap labor. But to Elena, that tiny cafe was everything. It paid enough for her to buy bread, pay rent for her single-room home, and send a few rupees to her ailing mother back in the village. She lived quietly, never complaining, never expecting miracles. Yet destiny, as it often does, was already moving pieces in the background, preparing to turn her small, unseen life into something extraordinary. Across town, in a glass building that touched the sky, lived someone who had everything Elena never did. His name was Ahad Rehman, a 30-year-old CEO, one of the youngest millionaires in the city. The media called him ruthless, brilliant, unstoppable. He built his empire from ambition and pain. Having lost his parents early, he buried his grief under work and wealth. But success hadn't brought peace. Behind every deal, behind every award, there was silence, the kind that luxury can't fill. He had learned to trust no one, love no one, and rely only on his own strength. Until one rainy evening, fate decided to bring his path crashing into Elena's. That night, Ahad's car broke down near the old cafe. Frustrated and cold, he stepped out, annoyed at the rain drenching his expensive suit. He noticed the cafe's warm light and stepped inside, hoping for coffee and silence. The place was almost empty, just a few tired customers, and one young woman quietly wiping the tables. Her clothes were soaked, her hair clung to her face, and yet her eyes shone with quiet strength. For reasons he couldn't explain, Ahad watched her longer than he meant to. There was something about her, not beauty in the usual sense, but something purer. A calm dignity, a kind of strength that didn't shout, only endured. When he accidentally spilled his coffee later that evening, she rushed to clean it, apologizing though it wasn't her fault. She smiled, a tired, gentle smile that reached her eyes, and he felt something move inside him. A small, unfamiliar warmth. He left without saying a word, but that smile stayed with him long after. Days passed, but Ahad couldn't forget the girl from the cafe. He told himself it was foolish. He was a CEO. She was a poor worker. Their worlds didn't even touch. Yet something kept pulling him back. He returned again, quietly, sitting at the same table, ordering the same coffee. She didn't recognize him as a millionaire. To her, he was just another tired man seeking warmth in a cheap cafe. And strangely, he liked that. For once, he didn't have to be the boss, the CEO, the man everyone feared or admired. Around her, he felt human. Elena noticed him too. The quiet man who always left a generous tip, who thanked her softly every time she cleaned his table. She never imagined someone like him could be anything more than a kind customer. Her world was small, and dreams felt dangerous, the kind that hurt when they vanished. Yet slowly, unknowingly, her heart began to notice him too, not for his looks or money, but for his eyes that carried sadness behind strength, loneliness behind success. One evening, the cafe owner announced it was closing down. Rent had gone up, and they couldn't afford to keep it running. Eleanor's world shattered quietly. She didn't cry in front of anyone, but when she went home that night, she sat alone in darkness, wondering what she would do now. Her mother's medicine, her rent, her food, everything depended on that small job. The next morning, she still went to the cafe, sweeping floors one last time, trying to memorize the place that had given her purpose. That's when Ahad arrived, only to find her sitting quietly, holding back tears. For the first time, he spoke more than a few words. He asked if she was all right. She smiled again, that same fragile smile, and said, "I'll be fine. Life always finds a way." That sentence struck him deeply. Life always finds a way. He had built an empire believing the opposite, that life only gives what you fight for, what you take. But she spoke like someone who had nothing, yet still trusted life. He couldn't forget her words. That night, he made a decision that would change both their lives. A few days later, Elena got a call. A new cafe was opening, elegant, bright, and modern, and they were hiring. She went for the interview, nervous and shy, and to her shock, she got the job instantly. The salary was better, the place cleaner, the boss kind. She had no idea that behind it all was Ahad. He had quietly bought the old cafe's name and rebuilt it under a new company, ensuring she would be taken care of. But he never told her. He didn't want her gratitude. He just wanted to help, without her ever knowing who stood behind the curtain. Weeks turned into months. Ahad kept visiting, sometimes just to watch her from afar, sometimes to ask how she was doing. They began to talk more about life, dreams, and small things that didn't matter to anyone else but somehow meant everything to them. For the first time in years, Ahad laughed again. He learned what it felt like to listen, to care, to see the world through someone who had nothing but still smiled like she had everything. And Elena began to dream again, not of riches, but of love, kindness, and the small miracles she saw in his eyes. But happiness never comes without a test. One day, a newspaper headline broke the secret. CEO Ahad Rehman seen visiting local cafe worker for months. The world turned cruel overnight. The media mocked her, people gossiped, and she lost her job again. She ran away, ashamed and heartbroken, thinking she had ruined his name. When Ahad tried to find her, she had disappeared from the city. His world, once full of noise and power, suddenly felt empty again. He realized too late that love doesn't always wait. Months later, while visiting a small charity event in a poor neighborhood, Ahad saw a familiar face among the volunteers. It was Elena, dressed simply, her hands distributing food to children, her smile as bright as ever. She had started working for an NGO, using what little she earned to help others. Watching her, Ahad finally understood why he had fallen for her. She didn't need luxury to shine. Her worth was never measured by what she owned, it was in what she gave. He walked up to her, quietly, and for a moment the world seemed to stop. No words were needed. She looked at him, not with surprise, but with peace, as if she had always known he would find her. In that silent moment, surrounded by children's laughter and fading sunlight, two hearts that came from different worlds finally stood equal. Ahad didn't care about the headlines anymore. He didn't care what people said or thought. For the first time, he chose someone, not for status, but for truth. And Elena, though afraid, chose to believe in that truth too. They didn't promise a fairy tale. Life had taught them both too much for that. But they promised something real, to walk together, one step at a time, through storms and sunlight alike. Their story became a quiet legend in the city. The millionaire who fell for a poor girl, but the truth behind it was deeper. He didn't just fall in love with her, he learned from her. She reminded him that love is not bought, success is not happiness, and sometimes the poorest heart gives the richest love. If this story touched your heart, please like, share, and subscribe. Your support helps us create more stories that remind the world that real love still exists, beyond money, fame, and fear. Speech balloon special. Request a comment below with one line. Love has no price, only truth. If you believe love can heal even the deepest wounds. In the end, Elena and Ahad built a life not defined by wealth or class, but by gratitude and grace. They opened community cafes that offered free meals for the poor, hiring those who had nowhere else to go. Elena's dream became their mission, to make sure no one ever felt invisible the way she once did. And whenever people asked how a millionaire fell for a poor girl, Ahad would simply smile and say, because she had something I didn't. Peace. Under the same sky that once saw her walking alone in the rain, they now stood side by side, not as rich or poor, but as two souls who had found home in each other's hearts. Sparkles, because sometimes the richest hearts are the ones that have known hunger and still choose to love.